My name is Hannah Price. I'm 28 years old, and up until last spring, I thought I understood my family. We weren't perfect, no family is, but I believed loyalty meant something. I believed love covered flaws. I believed respect was a given, at least for those who had earned it. I was wrong. The story really begins with my brother, Caleb. He's 31, loud, charming, the kind of man who walks into a room and soaks up all the attention without even trying. Growing up, he was the golden child. Teachers adored him, coaches praised him, and my parents, especially my mom, saw no fault in him. Meanwhile, I was the quieter one, the studious daughter, the planner, the helper. I thought if I worked hard enough, I'd be noticed too. But in our house, Caleb was the sun, and I was just the shadow he cast. Still, I loved him. I stood by him through failed jobs, through reckless choices, through heartbreak after heartbreak. When he met Marissa, the woman who would become his wife, I hoped maybe things would settle, that maybe stability would finally find him. She was sophisticated, from a well-off family, and Caleb seemed determined to prove himself. Their wedding became the event of the year in our town, a lavish affair with over 200 guests, the kind of spectacle that eats months of planning and mountains of money. But there was one guest whose presence meant more than anyone else's: our grandfather, Richard Price. To most people, he's Richard the Billionaire. His name is in magazines, on plaques in museums, on the list of top philanthropists in the country. He built an empire in finance decades ago, and while age has slowed him, he's 83 now, his mind is still sharp, and his heart, at least toward us, has always been generous. He never lorded his money over us. Instead, he used it to create memories, summer trips to his lake house, Christmas presents wrapped in shiny paper, scholarships for our cousins' schools. For me, he was the one adult who truly saw me, not just Caleb's sister but Hannah, the girl who loved books and sketching, the one who listened more than she spoke. When Caleb announced his wedding, Grandpa insisted he wouldn't miss it. He arranged his own travel, booked his flights, and after 5 grueling hours in the air, he arrived at the venue, a sprawling vineyard estate just outside the city. He was frail from the trip, leaning on his cane, but his eyes sparkled with pride. I was the one who greeted him at the entrance. "Grandpa," I said, hugging him tightly. He smelled faintly of cedar and cologne, the scent that always reminded me of his study. "Hannah, sweetheart," he smiled. I wouldn't miss Caleb's big day for the world. My chest warmed. Whatever else happened that day, at least Grandpa was here. But as I guided him inside, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. At the far end of the reception hall, near the service doors, there was a small table, 2 chairs pushed awkwardly against the wall, dangerously close to the bins where servers dumped empty bottles and plates. And on that table was a name card: Richard Price. I froze. It had to be a mistake. There was no way my grandfather, who had flown across the country, who was one of the most important guests there, was being sat next to the trash. I grabbed the card, my pulse racing, and marched toward the seating chart display at the front. His name wasn't listed among the family tables, not near the bride and groom, not even close to the extended relatives. No. They had shoved him in a corner, like an afterthought. My mother appeared then, dressed elegantly in emerald silk, her blonde hair pinned perfectly. She spotted me holding the card and frowned. "What are you doing with that?" she asked. I stared at her. "Mom, this has to be a mistake. You put Grandpa by the trash bins." Her expression didn't change. "It's not a mistake. He'll be fine there." "Fine." My voice cracked. "He's Caleb's grandfather. He flew 5 hours to be here. He deserves a place of honor, not this." I waved the card in disbelief. Her lips tightened. "Don't start, Hannah. You know how these things go. The seating chart is about appearances. The important guests, the bride's family, Caleb's colleagues, they need to be at the front. Your grandfather, well, he doesn't mix as easily anymore." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Appearances? He's the reason half of this is even possible. Do you think Marissa's family would care about this vineyard if Grandpa hadn't invested in it years ago? Her eyes narrowed. "Lower your voice. This is Caleb's day, not yours. Don't embarrass us." The fury that rose in me was sharp and hot, but before I could speak again, Grandpa touched my arm gently. "It's all right, Hannah," he murmured. His voice was calm, but I saw the flicker of hurt in his eyes. "Let's not cause a scene." I clenched my fists. He was too kind, too gracious. But I wasn't going to let this slide. Later, during the reception, I saw it play out exactly as I feared. Grandpa sat hunched at that tiny table, the trash bins just feet away, the smell drifting each time the service door swung open. People passed him by without a glance. The laughter and clinking glasses from the main tables filled the air, while he sat isolated, his cane leaning against his chair like a forgotten accessory. I brought him a glass of water, crouched beside him. "I'm so sorry, Grandpa. You deserve better than this." He smiled faintly. "Don't apologize for other people's choices, sweetheart. Just promise me you won't let them change you." His words lodged in my heart. But before I could reply, my mother appeared again. Her face was tight, her steps sharp. "Hannah," she hissed, "come with me." I stood, confused. "What is it?" She dragged me toward a side corridor, out of sight of the guests. Her hand was like iron around my wrist. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. Hovering over him, making everyone notice? "You're drawing attention to a seat assignment like it's the end of the world." "Because it is wrong," I snapped. "He deserves respect. He deserves better than being hidden by the trash." Her eyes blazed. "Don't you dare lecture me. I organized this wedding, not you. If you can't behave, then maybe you shouldn't be here at all." And then, before I could even process it, she slapped me. The sting exploded across my cheek, shocking me into silence. My breath caught, my hand flying up instinctively to cover the burning skin. I stared at her, stunned. You hit me?" Her voice was icy. "You need to learn your place, Hannah." For a moment, the world tilted. The laughter from the reception hall felt miles away, muffled by the roar of blood in my ears. My own mother, who should have defended both me and Grandpa, had humiliated us both in one brutal act. I stood frozen, my cheek throbbing, my heart shattering. And in that moment, I realized something I'd never dared to admit before. In this family, love was conditional. Respect was negotiable. And loyalty? It was a currency traded at the expense of the people who deserved it most. I stood in that side corridor, cheek throbbing, my mother's words echoing like poison. "You need to learn your place, Hannah." For a moment, I couldn't move. My skin burned where her hand had landed, but it wasn't the pain that stunned me. It was the betrayal. The shock of realizing that in her eyes, defending Grandpa wasn't honorable. It was rebellion. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand how she could do this. But my throat locked, my breath caught in jagged shudders. When I finally spoke, my voice was barely a whisper. "You chose appearances over him. Over your own father." Her face didn't soften. If anything, it hardened. "I chose what was necessary. This day is about Caleb, not Richard. Not you." And with that, she turned on her heel and walked back toward the laughter and music, leaving me in the shadows, trembling. I pressed my back against the wall, fighting the sting in my eyes. If I went back out there, everyone would see my swollen cheek, my shaken hands. They'd whisper, they'd guess. And my mother, she'd smile and pretend nothing had happened. I stayed in that corridor longer than I should have, trying to steady myself. When I finally emerged, I slipped quietly to Grandpa's table. He looked up immediately, his sharp eyes narrowing. "What happened?" "Nothing," I whispered. But my voice wavered. He reached out, his hand warm against mine. "Hannah, look at me." Reluctantly, I met his gaze. His eyes flicked to my cheek, where the redness still lingered. His jaw tightened. "She hit you." My chest constricted. I didn't want him to know, didn't want him to carry that hurt on top of the insult he'd already endured. But Grandpa had always been able to read me like an open book. I tried to stop her. I choked. "I just wanted you treated with respect." And she... My voice broke, shame flooding through me. He squeezed my hand gently. "Don't you dare carry shame for their actions. You did nothing wrong." Tears spilled before I could stop them. I bent my head, embarrassed, but he patted my hand like he always had when I was little. "You've got her fire," he said softly. "But her fire burns people. Yours will light the way." I bit my lip hard, trying to hold myself together. But his kindness only made the wound inside me split wider. Meanwhile, the reception swirled around us like a dream I wasn't part of. Guests clinked champagne glasses, laughter rolled like waves, music pulsed from the dance floor. At the head table, Caleb and Marissa basked in attention, radiant in their tailored tuxedo and glittering gown. My parents sat proudly among them, faces glowing with pride. And in the corner, my grandfather, the man who had funded Caleb's college tuition, who had built the foundation that gave us the lives we lived, sat by the trash, ignored. I wanted to storm the microphone, to shout the truth. This man deserves your respect. He deserves to sit at the front, not hidden like garbage. But my cheek still burned, a reminder of what speaking up had cost me. So I stayed, sat beside him, brought him plates of food, refilled his glass, listened when he told me stories to distract me from the humiliation. It was then I noticed the way other guests looked at us. Not pity, exactly, but something colder. Curiosity. Amusement. As if they were in on a joke. I wasn't. Sophie, my cousin, passed by once, her designer dress swishing around her ankles. She leaned down with a mocking smile. "Comfortable over here, Hannah? I guess someone has to babysit the old man." My fists clenched under the table. I wanted to spit back something cruel, but Grandpa squeezed my arm lightly. "Let it go," he whispered. So I let it go. Out loud. Inside, though, the anger simmered like acid. The night dragged on. When the speeches began, I held my breath. I thought, maybe Caleb would do the right thing. Maybe he would acknowledge the grandfather who had flown hours to be here, who had loved him through everything. But when Caleb took the microphone, his toast was filled with stories of himself, of Marissa, of friends who'd stood by him. He praised our parents, thanked Marissa's family, toasted his in-laws. Not once did he mention Grandpa. I sat frozen, my chest tightening with every word. Grandpa's face didn't move, but his hand gripped his cane so tightly I thought it might snap. When the applause died down, he leaned close to me and whispered, "Don't ever think silence makes you powerless. Sometimes silence is the strongest indictment." I nodded, though my throat ached. Later, after the dances and the cake, my mother approached again. Her expression was smooth, pleasant for the guests around her, but her eyes burned when she looked at me. "You've sulked enough," she said under her breath. "Pull yourself together before people start asking questions." I stared at her, incredulous. "Sulked? Mom, you humiliated your father. You humiliated me." Her lips curved in a tight smile. "What I did was keep this family's image intact. You wouldn't understand." My voice rose despite myself. "No, I don't understand. How could you treat your father like trash, literally? How could you hit me for trying to stand up for him?" A few guests glanced our way. My mother's smile widened, but her voice was a hiss. "Lower your tone. If you don't, you'll regret it." That was it. The final crack. Something in me broke. I stepped back, my voice loud enough for others to hear. "You're ashamed of him. You're ashamed of me. But maybe the only shame here is yours." Gasps rippled from nearby tables. My mother's smile faltered, her mask slipping. She grabbed my arm tightly, nails digging in, but I pulled free. For the first time in my life, I didn't back down. I walked straight to Grandpa. "Come on," I whispered. "We're leaving." He looked at me, eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years, pride. He nodded. We left the vineyard together, the laughter and music fading behind us. Outside, the night air was crisp, the stars sharp against the dark. Grandpa leaned on his cane, moving slowly, but his steps were steady. "Thank you," he said quietly as we reached the car. "For what?" I asked, my voice shaking. "For seeing me," he said simply, "when the people closest to me chose not to." My throat tightened. Tears blurred the stars above us. "Always, Grandpa. Always." We rode back to his hotel in silence, but it wasn't empty. It was full of unspoken truths, of wounds too deep for words, of a bond forged in fire. And as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of my tiny apartment, one thought burned inside me. My family had broken something sacred, and whether I sought revenge or simply walked away, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after the wedding, I woke with a dull ache in my cheek, the ghost of my mother's hand still imprinted there. But the ache inside my chest was worse. I scrolled through social media, and the betrayal played out all over again in pictures. My brother and his bride beamed in glossy photos. My parents radiated pride, and cousins gushed about the most beautiful night ever. Nowhere was my grandfather mentioned. No picture of him, no note of gratitude, not even a passing word that he had traveled hours, frail and tired, just to be ignored. It was as if he had been erased. I wanted to post the truth. I wanted to scream, "Do you see what they did? Do you see how they treated him? Do you see how my mother slapped me for daring to care?" But my finger hovered over the keyboard and froze. Because deep down, I knew the comments would not defend me. They would defend Caleb. They would defend the wedding. And they would call me bitter, jealous, dramatic. That's how it always worked in my family. So I put the phone down, curled on my couch, and cried. Later that afternoon, Grandpa called. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice soft but steady. "How are you holding up?" The concern in his tone nearly broke me. I don't know. I can't stop thinking about it. They erased you, Grandpa. And when I tried to defend you, my voice cracked. She hit me. "I know," he said gently. "I saw." Shame flooded me. "I'm sorry. I should have been stronger. I should have." "No," he cut me off firmly. "You were strong. You spoke when no one else dared. That takes more courage than anything." I pressed the phone to my ear, tears streaming. But it didn't change anything. Caleb ignored you. Mom humiliated you. It's like none of it mattered. "Oh, it mattered," he said quietly. "Maybe not to them, but to me. And to you. Don't underestimate the power of simply refusing to look away." His words lingered long after we hung up, but so did the hollow ache of knowing the rest of the family saw things differently. That evening, my mother showed up at my apartment. She didn't knock politely. She pounded until I opened the door. Her expression was sharp, her lipstick perfect, her hair pinned like she was still hosting the wedding. "We need to talk," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I folded my arms, my stomach churning. "About what?" "About how you slapped me. About how you humiliated Grandpa." Her eyes flashed, but her voice was smooth. "About how you embarrassed this family." I laughed bitterly. "Embarrassed? Mom, you shoved your own father next to the trash bins. You acted like he was disposable." Her smile was thin. "Appearances, Hannah. That's what matters. Caleb's future depends on connections. Richard sitting up front, old and frail, would have distracted people. You don't understand how these things work." I stared at her, horrified. "He's not a prop. He's your father. And you treated him like garbage." Her voice hardened. "You're naive. You think respect is automatic. It's not. Respect is earned by being useful." The words hit me like ice water. Useful. That was what my mother believed people were worth, what they could provide, not who they were. "And me?" I whispered. "Am I only useful if I stay quiet?" She tilted her head. "You be wise to remember your place. Caleb is the future of this family. Not you. If you keep making noise, you'll cut yourself off from everything." My throat burned. Maybe that's better than living like this. For a flicker of a moment, something crossed her face. Fear, maybe, or anger too deep to show. But then she straightened her shoulders. "Think carefully, Hannah. You don't want to regret this." She left without another word, her perfume lingering like smoke. For days afterward, her threat haunted me. I avoided family calls, ignored messages from cousins, and buried myself in work. But whispers found me anyway. A coworker leaned over my desk one morning, lowering her voice. "I heard about the wedding. People are saying you caused a scene. My stomach dropped. Who's saying that? She shrugged. Your cousin Sophie posted something cryptic about jealous relatives who can't handle being overshadowed. Everyone knows she meant you. The humiliation burned hot in my chest. I hadn't caused a scene. I had tried to protect dignity. And yet the narrative was already twisted, the family spinning their story like they always did, painting me as the problem. That night, I lay awake replaying everything: Grandpa hunched by the trash, my mother's slap, my brother's silence. The injustice festered until it became something sharper. Maybe I couldn't change them, but I could refuse to let them write the story unchallenged. The first step was talking to Caleb. I called him late one evening, after rehearsing what I'd say a dozen times. When he finally answered, his voice was groggy but annoyed. What, Hannah? I swallowed hard. I need to ask you something.
Why didn't you honor Grandpa?
He flew across the country for you, and you didn't even mention him in your speech. Silence stretched. Then he sighed. Because Mom said not to. My chest tightened. Not to? Why? She said it would make things awkward. That people would focus on him instead of me and Marissa. Look, Hannah, this wedding wasn't about Grandpa. It was about us. I wanted to scream. Do you hear yourself? You put strangers and appearances above the man who gave you everything. How can you live with that? His voice sharpened. Don't guilt me.
I don't need this right now.
You've already stirred enough drama. Just drop it, okay? No, I said firmly. I won't drop it. Not this time. He hung up without another word. I stared at my phone, shaking, realizing just how deep the rot ran. A week later, I met Grandpa for lunch at a quiet cafe. He looked tired, older somehow, but when he saw me, his smile softened. I've been thinking, he said once we Saturday, about what happened. Me too, I admitted. It keeps eating at me. They don't see what they did was wrong. They'll never admit it. He stirred his tea slowly. That's true. Some people never will. But that doesn't mean you stop speaking the truth. I studied him. So, what do we do? His eyes twinkled faintly. That depends. Do you want to survive, or do you want to fight back? The question startled me. Grandpa had always been gentle, measured. But there was steel under his calm words, the kind I'd only seen glimpses of. Fight back. I echoed. He nodded. I'm not powerless, Hannah. Neither are you. They've forgotten that respect is not theirs to decide. Perhaps it's time to remind them. A shiver ran through me. Was this the start of something more? Something beyond endurance? Something closer to justice? I didn't answer right away. But for the first time, I considered it. Maybe silence wasn't enough. Maybe we needed to show them that dignity couldn't be erased. Not mine, not his. And maybe revenge wasn't such a dirty word after all. When Grandpa asked me if I wanted to survive or fight back, the question didn't leave me. It rolled around in my head every night as I lay awake, the sting of my mother's slap replaying in my mind, the image of Grandpa's hunched shoulders by the trash burning in my chest. I had spent my whole life surviving my family's favoritism, their silences, their subtle cuts. But surviving hadn't saved me. It hadn't saved Grandpa either. Maybe fighting back was the only way left. At lunch that day, I finally whispered, I want to fight. Grandpa's eyes lit, a spark of pride I hadn't seen in years. Good, he said. Then we'll do it together. His plan didn't unfold like some dramatic movie plot. There were no sudden confrontations or shouted threats. Grandpa was too smart for that. He believed revenge was best served slow, meticulous, and undeniable. You don't burn the whole house down, he explained one evening as we sat in his study. You let the rot eat through the beams until it collapses on its own. I leaned forward. So, what do we do? He tapped his cane against the floor, thoughtful. They thrive on image, Hannah. Your mother, Caleb, Marissa, they survive on how the world sees them. We don't have to destroy them outright. We just have to show the world what they truly are. Once that happens, their own greed and arrogance will finish the job. It made sense. My mother's obsession with appearances had fueled everything: the seating chart, the slap, the silencing. Caleb's career hinged on looking like a golden boy. If that image cracked, even slightly, it would all come undone. But how could we show the world without looking vindictive? Grandpa smiled faintly. Leave that to me. The first step came quietly. Grandpa had long donated to charities, hospitals, scholarships. But now, instead of funneling his gifts through family events or in Caleb's name, he started directing them in mine. A scholarship fund called the Eleanor Foundation after my grandmother. An endowment to a university library. Grants for young women in business, all signed with Richard and Hannah Price. The press picked it up almost immediately. Headlines praised the initiative, calling it a refreshing shift in the Price family legacy. My phone buzzed with notifications from friends congratulating me, though I hadn't even known the scope of what he'd planned. When Caleb called, his voice was sharp. What is this about you and Grandpa? Why wasn't I included? Because you weren't there, I said simply. Because you didn't care. He cursed under his breath. You're trying to steal the spotlight. Mom was right. You're jealous. I almost laughed. Jealous of what? Being her punching bag? Being your afterthought? No, Caleb. I'm just done staying silent. He hung up, but his rage was proof the plan was working. The next strike came from Grandpa himself. He penned an op-ed in a major paper, not directly about the wedding, but about how we treat our elders and what it says about our character. In it, he wrote about flying across the country to celebrate family, only to be seated where the garbage was taken out. He never named names, but the imagery was vivid. Readers connected the dots easily. Social media exploded with outrage. Who would treat their grandfather like that? Money can't buy class. The whispers that had painted me dramatic began to shift. For the first time, people weren't just looking at me, they were looking at them. My mother showed up again, her face pale with fury. She slammed the newspaper down on my kitchen counter. Did you encourage him to do this? She demanded. I met her eyes steadily. I didn't have to encourage him. He told the truth. Her lips thinned. Do you have any idea what you've done? People are talking. Caleb's investors are asking questions. Marissa's family is furious. You're jeopardizing everything. I laughed bitterly. Everything? Or just your image? Her hand twitched like she wanted to strike me again, but she stopped herself. Maybe because now people were watching. You've made an enemy of me, Hannah, she whispered coldly. I stared at her, my cheek burning with memory. You already did that the moment you slapped me. Even as the fallout rippled, Grandpa's health began to falter. He was old, the stress heavy on his frame. One evening, I found him in his study, breathing heavily, his cane shaking in his hand. Grandpa, maybe we should slow down. No, he said, cutting me off. We finished this. I don't know how much time I have left, but I won't leave you surrounded by wolves. My throat tightened. You don't have to protect me. Yes, I do. His voice was fierce despite his weakness. Because you're the only one who still remembers what this family was supposed to mean. Tears burned my eyes, but I nodded. The final blow came at a charity gala 2 months later. My mother had orchestrated the event to celebrate Caleb's business ventures, inviting half the city's elite. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, champagne flowed, cameras flashed. But when Grandpa arrived, with me on his arm, everything shifted. He wore his finest suit, his cane tapping the marble floor with dignity. Conversations hushed as he entered, reporters snapping photos. And when he was handed the microphone to give a speech, he didn't waste the chance. I came tonight, he began, his voice steady, because I wanted to remind everyone what family means. It doesn't mean seating your elders by the trash. It doesn't mean silencing those who speak up. It doesn't mean slapping your own daughter for daring to care. A collective gasp swept the room. My mother's face drained of color. Caleb stiffened at the head table, Marissa's hand frozen on his arm. Grandpa continued, his voice like iron. Family means honor, respect, loyalty. And when those things are lost, money and image mean nothing. Nothing at all. The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was thunderous. Cameras flashed like lightning. And in that moment, the carefully constructed facade my mother had built crumbled. The fallout was immediate. Headlines plastered the story everywhere. Billionaire Richard Price calls out family at gala. Video clips spread online, racking up millions of views. Comment sections skewered my mother and Caleb, praising Grandpa's courage and condemning their cruelty. Investors pulled back from Caleb's ventures, citing concerns about character. Marissa's family distanced themselves, suddenly less eager to be tied to the Prices. And my mother, once the darling hostess, found doors quietly closing, invitations rescinded. She tried to spin it, of course, claiming misunderstandings, painting herself as the victim of an old man's exaggerations.
But the world didn't buy it.
Too many people had seen the truth in his words. For me, life didn't magically become perfect. My relationship with my parents and brother was shattered beyond repair. My cousins avoided me. Family gatherings stopped including my name on the invites. But I gained something more valuable: freedom. And more than that, I gained Grandpa's pride. "You did it," he told me one evening, his hand warm on mine. "You reminded them that dignity matters more than image." "No," I whispered, tears in my eyes. "We did it." As I tucked him into bed that night, his eyes closed, his breathing steady, I realized revenge hadn't been about cruelty or payback. It had been about truth. About refusing to let love be erased. About making sure the world knew what we knew, that Richard Price deserved honor, and no amount of appearances could change that. And for the first time, I felt peace. Because I hadn't just survived. I had fought back. And I had won. The weeks after the gala felt like a storm that just wouldn't let up. Everywhere I turned, people were talking. At the grocery store, whispers followed me down the aisle. At work, coworkers glanced at me with curiosity thinly disguised as sympathy. Even my inbox filled with messages from strangers, some thanking me for standing by my grandfather, others calling me selfish for airing family drama in public. But the loudest backlash came from my family. My mother sent me a single message, cold as ice. "You've destroyed us. Don't come near this house again." Caleb's voice followed a day later in a voicemail. "You ruined everything, Hannah. Investors are backing out. Marissa's family is furious. Do you even care what you've done? Or do you just enjoy watching us burn?" I deleted it without replying. Because the truth was, they hadn't needed my help to burn. Their own cruelty had lit the match. Grandpa, meanwhile, seemed lighter after the gala. We met often, sometimes at his home, sometimes at small cafes where he was greeted like an old friend. He still tired easily, but his spirit was fierce. "They can hate us all they want," he said one afternoon as we shared tea in his study. "Hate is easier than facing themselves. But the truth's out now. No one can erase it." I studied him, marveling at his resilience. "Don't you ever regret it? Calling them out so publicly?" He shook his head, the corner of his mouth lifting. "Not for a second. I've spent my whole life building an empire, and I thought the legacy would be money, buildings, donations. But legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who you stand beside." And that night, I stood beside the only one who stood beside me. His words cut deep. For so long, I'd felt invisible in my family, the forgotten daughter, the afterthought. But with him, I mattered. Still, loneliness crept in. Invitations to family dinners stopped. My cousins blocked me on social media. Even distant relatives sent clipped messages warning me I'd gone too far. I told Grandpa once, tears in my eyes, "I feel like I don't have a family anymore." He reached for my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Then maybe it's time to redefine family. Blood doesn't guarantee love. Love does. And you've given me more loyalty than all of them combined." I swallowed hard, squeezing his hand. "I'm just scared sometimes. What if I'm wrong? What if I ruin things beyond repair?" He leaned back, studying me. "You didn't ruin anything, Hannah. You revealed it. There's a difference." One night, unable to sleep, I wandered through my apartment, replaying every wound. My mother's slap, Caleb's indifference, Sophie's mocking words. The way I'd been painted as jealous, bitter, dramatic. But then I remembered Grandpa at that table by the trash, his dignity stripped away, and I knew I wasn't wrong. They had betrayed him. They had betrayed me. All I had done was refuse to stay silent. A month later, Grandpa called me to his estate. When I arrived, he was sitting at his desk, papers spread before him. He looked tired, pale, but his eyes gleamed with purpose. "I've been making arrangements," he said quietly. I frowned. "Arrangements?" He nodded. "You know I'm not a young man anymore. My time is limited, and I don't intend to waste what's left pretending this family hasn't rotted. So I've been reworking my will." The air seemed to vanish from the room. "Grandpa, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." His tone was firm. "Hannah, you're the only one who's stood by me, who's treated me with love and respect. The rest see me as a wallet. You saw me as a man. And that matters more than money ever will. That's why I want you to carry the legacy forward." I shook my head, overwhelmed. "They'll hate me even more if you do that." "They already hate you," he said simply. "At least let their hate serve a purpose." I covered my face with my hands, tears spilling. "I don't want your money, Grandpa. I just want you." He reached across the desk, his hand warm against mine. "I'm not leaving you a fortune, Hannah. I'm leaving you a weapon. What you do with it will be up to you. Protect it. Use it wisely. And never let them take your voice again." For the first time, I saw the outlines of a future I hadn't dared imagine. One where I wasn't the family's shadow, but its mirror. One where I could show the world who they really were. But that future scared me, too. Because I knew what my mother and Caleb were capable of when their pride was wounded. The storm wasn't over. It was only beginning. The next family clash came sooner than expected. My cousin Sophie invited me to clear the air at a small dinner. Against my better judgment, I went, hoping maybe someone was willing to bridge the divide. But when I arrived, I realized too late it was a trap. My mother, Caleb, and two of my uncles were there, their faces cold. My mother didn't waste time. "We know what Richard is planning. We know he's rewriting the will. And we know he's putting you at the center of it." My chest tightened. "That's his decision, not mine." Caleb leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Do you really think you deserve it? You? The girl who ruined our wedding, humiliated Mom, and turned Grandpa against us." I swallowed hard, keeping my voice steady. "I didn't turn him against you. You did that yourselves." My mother's eyes narrowed. "If you don't step aside, if you don't convince him to reverse this, you'll regret it." I felt the old fear rise, the part of me that had always cowered before their wrath. But then I remembered Grandpa's words. "You didn't ruin anything. You revealed it." So I met their eyes, my voice steady. "I won't betray him. Not for you. Not for anyone." Their faces hardened. Caleb shoved back his chair, storming out. My mother's lips curled into a sneer. "You've made your choice. Don't expect us to save you when it all comes crashing down." I walked out of that room shaking, but I didn't regret it. For once, I had chosen loyalty to the one person who deserved it. When I told Grandpa what happened, he sighed heavily. "They'll come for you harder now. But you're stronger than you know." I wanted to believe him. But deep down, I feared the war was only beginning. Because betrayal had already cost me my family. And now, it was about to test how much further I was willing to go. By the time February came around, I could feel the pressure tightening like a noose. My mother and Caleb didn't just ignore me anymore, they mobilized. Whispers reached me through old family friends. They were telling anyone who would listen that Grandpa was confused, declining, being manipulated by Hannah. It made my stomach twist. Not because their lies surprised me, they didn't, but because I knew how damaging that narrative could be. If enough people believed Grandpa wasn't in his right mind, they could challenge his will. They could strip him of agency. One morning, I found Grandpa sitting in his study, staring at the newspaper. His op-ed from months before had been folded open on his desk, marked up with cruel notes in red ink. "Senile, bitter old man, coached by granddaughter. They're trying to erase me while I'm still alive," he said quietly. Anger surged in me. "We can fight this. We can prove you're fine." He glanced at me, his eyes still sharp despite the lines of age. I know I'm fine. You know I'm fine. But the law doesn't always care about truth, Hannah. It cares about perception. And they're winning that battle. His words chilled me. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just a family feud, it was a war for control. A week later, the war escalated. I came home to find an envelope slid under my apartment door. Inside was a legal notice. My mother and Caleb had filed a petition to appoint a conservator for Grandpa, citing cognitive decline. I nearly dropped the paper. They were trying to declare him incompetent. My hands shook as I called Grandpa. When he answered, his voice was steady but tired. I know, he said before I could speak. They've made their move. Tears stung my eyes. We can't let them do this to you. They can't take away your freedom.
They'll try, he said.
But we'll be ready. The following days blurred into a frenzy of lawyers, medical evaluations, and strategy meetings. Grandpa's attorney, a wiry man named Malcolm, assured us, this is a classic power grab. They'll drag his age into it, try to twist any small forgetfulness into proof. But if Richard passes a full evaluation, their petition doesn't stand a chance. Grandpa smiled faintly. Then we let them test me. I've been outwitting sharks longer than they've been alive. Still, I worried. Not about his mind. He was sharp as ever. But about their ruthlessness. They weren't above manipulation. I feared what they might do if the evaluation didn't go their way. The day of the medical exam, I sat outside the office, my stomach knotted. Grandpa walked in with his cane, dressed in a crisp suit, dignity radiating from him. When he emerged an hour later, he was grinning. Passed with flying colors, he said, lifting the report like a trophy. Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. Caleb was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his car with arms crossed. Well, he sneered. Dragging him through hoops just to keep your hands on his wallet? My fists clenched. This was your doing, Caleb. You're trying to strip him of his freedom. Caleb's smile was cold. Freedom? He doesn't need freedom. He needs protection from you. Grandpa stepped forward, his cane tapping the asphalt. The only thing I need protection from is my own son and grandson, he said sharply. You should be ashamed. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He slid into his car and drove off, tires screeching. I exhaled shakily, realizing just how far they were willing to go. That night, Grandpa called me into his study again. It's time to stop being defensive, he said. It's time to go on offense. What do you mean? I asked. He handed me a thick folder. Inside were documents I didn't recognize, contracts, emails, bank records. These, he explained, are receipts. Your mother and Caleb have been siphoning money through shell accounts for years, using my name. Donations that never reach charities. Investments that lined their pockets. I've kept records, Hannah. I always knew they'd try something like this. My breath caught. Why didn't you stop them sooner? Because sometimes, he said, leaning back, you let people dig their own graves. And now, the hole is deep enough. I flipped through the papers, each page heavier than the last.
Fraud.
Embezzlement. Deceit masked as family loyalty. They wanted to declare me incompetent, Grandpa continued. Instead, we'll show the world who's truly unfit. The next few weeks were a blur of preparation. Malcolm assembled a team, lining up auditors and investigators. Grandpa gave interviews, measured, calm, but pointed. He spoke about the importance of transparency, about the danger of letting family exploit wealth. He never named names, but the message was clear. And for the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something seismic, something that could finally turn the tables. But power always comes with danger. One night, as I left Grandpa's estate, I noticed a black car idling across the street. Its headlights flicked on as I pulled out, trailing me for blocks. My chest tightened, fear crawling up my throat. When I finally swerved into a crowded gas station, the car sped off. I called Grandpa, my voice shaking. They're watching me. I know, he said quietly. They're desperate. Desperate people do reckless things. Don't let them scare you. But I was scared. Not for myself, but for him. A week later, during a family court hearing, the tension broke wide open. My mother sat across from us, her lawyer rattling off accusations. Mr. Price has shown signs of confusion. He relies too heavily on his granddaughter. He is vulnerable to manipulation. Grandpa stood when it was his turn, his voice steady as stone. Confusion? Manipulation? Let me be clear. The only confusion here is why my own daughter and grandson think fraud and theft entitle them to power. And the only manipulation is theirs, siphoning money for years while smiling at my table. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as Malcolm submitted the documents. My mother's face drained of color, Caleb's fists tightened. The judge studied the papers, her brow furrowed. These are serious allegations. They are facts, Grandpa said firmly. For the first time, the tide turned. After the hearing, as we walked into the sunlight, Grandpa leaned on my arm. This isn't over, he murmured. But they've shown their hand. And we've shown ours. Now it's only a matter of time. I nodded, though a part of me trembled. Because I knew my family, they wouldn't stop until they were ruined, or we were. That night, sitting by his fireplace, Grandpa looked at me with weary eyes. Hannah, you need to be ready. Someday soon, all of this will fall on you. The legacy, the fight, the backlash. Are you prepared? I hesitated, my heart pounding. I don't know if I'm ready, but I'll do it anyway. A slow smile spread across his face. That's all I needed to hear. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about survival. It was about rewriting what family meant. And together, we were going to see it through, no matter how much more it cost. The court case stretched for weeks, dragging the family name through every headline imaginable. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, microphones shoved at us each morning. At first, I felt like I was drowning in the noise. But slowly, the tide began to shift. The evidence Grandpa had saved, meticulous records of fraud, transfers, and siphoned donations, spoke louder than any denial. Caleb raged in depositions. My mother wept crocodile tears on the stand, but the paper trail was undeniable. They hadn't just betrayed Grandpa. They had betrayed the very charities they bragged about supporting. One article put it bluntly, the Price family's rotten core exposed. For the first time, people weren't whispering about me. They were whispering about them. But even as their empire cracked, Grandpa grew weaker. I saw it in his shaking hands, in the way his cane tapped harder each step. He never admitted it, but I knew the fight was costing him. One evening, after a long day in court, I found him in his study, staring at an old photograph of my grandmother. His eyes were glassy, his shoulders slumped. "Are you all right?" I asked gently. He looked up, smiling faintly. "Just thinking about Eleanor. She would have been proud of you, you know." Tears pricked my eyes. "Do you really think so?" "I know so," he said firmly. "She always hated pretense. She would have been the first to tell you to speak the truth, no matter the cost." I sat beside him, resting my head against his shoulder. I just wish it hadn't come to this, that it hadn't torn us all apart. His hand covered mine. Sometimes, Hannah, you have to burn bridges to see who is really willing to walk across them. The final hearing was brutal. My mother's lawyer tried one last desperate play, claiming Grandpa's will had been rewritten under duress, that I had manipulated him for my own gain. But Malcolm, calm as ever, presented the medical evaluations, the video testimony of doctors confirming Grandpa's sharpness, and finally, the stack of documents showing my mother and Caleb's theft. The judge's decision was swift. The petition for conservatorship was denied. The fraud investigation was handed to federal prosecutors. And Grandpa's right to decide his estate was reaffirmed, beyond challenge. As the gavel struck, my mother's face went white. Caleb stormed out, his tie loosened, his voice cracking as he cursed. But Grandpa just smiled at me, eyes bright with quiet victory. 2 weeks later, he called me to his side. His health had taken a sharp downturn. The fight was over, and his body was tired. I sat by his bed, holding his frail hand, tears already welling. "I don't have much time left, sweetheart," he said softly. "But I want you to know, I've put everything in order. The estate, the foundation, the legacy. It's yours now. My throat closed. Grandpa, I don't want your money. I just want you. He squeezed my hand weakly. It's not about the money. It's about the power to protect yourself. To keep them from ever hurting you again. Promise me you'll use it wisely. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I promise. He smiled, his eyes closing. Good girl. You've always been stronger than you knew. He passed that night, quietly, peacefully, with my hand still in his. The funeral was small, private, at his request. I stood by his casket, watching as strangers approached with tears and stories of how he had changed their lives, funding their education, saving their businesses, keeping their dreams alive. But my mother and Caleb stood apart, stiff and silent. They hadn't been written out of the will quietly, they had been erased publicly. The reading a week later made it final. Everything, from the estate to the foundation, was entrusted to me. The shock on their faces was almost surreal. My mother's lips trembled, her eyes brimming with hatred. Caleb slammed his fist on the table, shouting, "This isn't fair. It should have been mine." The lawyer simply replied, "It was his choice." And that was that. The backlash was swift. My mother's reputation collapsed overnight. Caleb's business partners cut ties, investors fled, Marissa's family quietly annulled their support. And me? I inherited not just wealth, but a legacy. The Eleanor Foundation became my mission. I expanded scholarships, funded shelters, poured resources into causes Grandpa had cared about. The headlines shifted, from betrayal to legacy. Hannah Price honors her grandfather's memory. But even as the world applauded, the silence at home was deafening. My parents stopped calling. My brother never forgave me. My cousins treated me like an enemy. I had won the fight, but I had lost my family. One night, months later, I returned to the vineyard, the place it had all begun. The reception hall was quiet now, the chairs stacked, the tables bare. I walked to the far corner, where the trash bins had once stood, and sat on the floor. I closed my eyes and pictured Grandpa there, hunched but dignified, smiling at me through his pain. "I kept my promise," I whispered. "They'll never erase you again." The wind rustled through the vines outside, soft and steady, like his voice. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. Betrayal had carved me open. It had broken me in ways I didn't think I could survive. But in the end, truth and love had carried me through. I wasn't just the forgotten daughter anymore. I was Richard Price's granddaughter. And I had made sure the world would never forget him.